You are not thinking as God does, but as human beings do. Putting on the mind of Christ, thinking like God, not being conformed to this world, putting on the mind of Christ, thinking like God. I want to share a little experience I had with a student from the University of Idaho when I was the chaplain up there. Tell you about Dominic. Dominic and I were playing golf. I played golf with the students. I know it was rough life. And I want to share with you an experience we had about playing golf and not thinking like God does, but as people do. And how I had a massive moment of conversion in my life, really through this young man, Dominic. There's two big lessons from my little story, and we'll get into them. So we're playing golf, and those of you who play golf, hope you enjoy this. If you don't, well, sorry. We were just turning from the back nine to the front, and oftentimes in golf, you have to wait for the people ahead of you, and it's a kind of a slow-moving game, and it's a courteous game, and there was a man up on the tee box playing golf by himself, and we were sort of approaching the tee box. We were still a little ways away, and it looked like a middle-aged or a little older man, and he kind of slowly, he was sort of like stumbling and wavering, and he kind of hit a knee and fell over. And my first thought was, that guy's drunk. You're not thinking as God does, but as human beings do. And we noticed he wasn't getting up very quickly, kind of rolling around. So Dominic was the first one to rush over. And then I was right with Dominic. And we met this man, and his name was Steve. Steve was in the throes of a serious muscle disorder. Maybe something like muscular dystrophy, where his muscles were beginning to die. And he could barely stand. And we helped him stand up. And you could hear his bones popping and cracking as he stood up, and his ankles were so wobbly, I didn't even know how he could stand. And so Dominic and I said, Steve, can we golf with you? And we'll help you for this 9 holes. This was probably Steve's last round of golf ever, would be my guess. I thought, I am so awful. Because my first thought was a worldly thought. Thinking not as God does, but humans do. My first thought was so filled with judgment, so filled with worldly contempt. As St. Paul says, do not conform yourselves to this age, but be renewed by the transforming of your mind. My first thought wasn't compassion and care. My first thought was, some guy's drunk on the golf course. Wow. Then as we're playing golf with Steve, I learned a powerful lesson about not being conformed to this age. If any of you who play golf, you know, especially for us as men, the goal is to hit that ball far. And there's a great paradox in the game of golf that is, the harder you swing at the golf ball, the shorter the distance your ball will fly. Did you know that? Those of you who play golf, it's sort of odd. The harder you swing at the ball, the shorter the distance. But there's something in us, isn't there, men and women who play golf? Isn't there something where we just can't do that? We just want to swing hard. We want to go hard. We want to go hard. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Stop thinking like human beings do. The gospel is filled with paradox, isn't it? So often in the world, it's like we got to try and we got to work hard. And I'm watching Steve. Steve tees up his ball. We'd help him tee up his ball. I don't know how he golfed the first 9. And Steve is standing there. I'll come out here. And I'm not exaggerating. There's the fairway. And Steve is standing there, and his ankles are rolling over like this. He can barely stand. And it's cracking and crunching. And we're just waiting there to catch Steve. And Steve takes his driver, looks down, shaking, and swings. And that ball just goes down the middle of the fairway. And then Dominic and I get up there, tee up my ball. Steve outdrove us all day. Do not be conformed to this world. Be renewed, transformed by the renewal of your mind. Don't think like humans do. We need to think like God does. And God gives us, even in our human experiences, all of these moments where He's trying to teach us, even in a golf game, even in a man named Steve who can barely stand. I think God put him in my life that day to remind me that I have such a tendency in my life to just overdo something, to overpower something, to take control over it. And yet the gospel is filled with Jesus saying, stop doing that. And if you're willing to let go of your life, you'll save your life. If you choose to be humble, you'll be exalted. If you're willing to be the last, the crazy thing is you're going to be first. If you forgive others, God's forgiveness will come to you. If you forgive your enemies, you'll have peace in your life. You don't have to kill them first to have peace. Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Stop thinking like human beings do and think like God does. And so I offer you Steve. I don't know Steve's last name, and I don't even know if he's still alive. But Steve was Jesus for me that day, and so was Dominic. And I learned that I have a tendency, if I'm not careful, to render a quick judgment upon somebody. And that judgment oftentimes is absolutely 100% wrong. Completely out of the ballpark, incorrect, wrong. It took getting to know Steve and encounter him personally before I then really understood. Stop thinking like human beings do. Think like God does. Jesus says, do not judge, and you shall not be judged. And then I learned from Steve, Jesus present in Steve to me, don't swing so hard. Not just in the game of golf, but in life. When I'm struggling with something in my life, I just want to swing at it with all I have. Sometimes in our relationships, we get in an argument and we just start swinging verbally, don't we? I have to swing hard. No, you don't. No, you don't. Don't be conformed to this age. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Stop thinking like human beings do and think like God does. But I'm a human being, which is why I need a Savior, and which is why I'm here at church on Sunday morning. It's why I listen with great care to God's word speaking to me. And it's why I take such care to make sure that I receive the Eucharist, because I'm a human being and I so easily act like one. But Jesus also took on the nature of a human being, and He filled it with divine majesty and modeled what a human being could look like when a human being entered into communion with God. And it's really simple. Don't be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Stop thinking like human beings do. Think a bit more like God does. So Steve, if you're out there, I'm praying for you, and I remember you a lot. Dominic, thanks for that lesson that day. And if you're open, Jesus will meet you anywhere. On a golf course, where you might least expect it.